All right, William, I think tonight we should talk about your life growing up in the...
Okay. Growing up in the Bronx and all that.
Yeah, starting in the Bronx.
Well, we lived at 717 East 181st Street in the Bronx, between Clinton and Crotona Avenues, which was about 8 or 9, 10 blocks from Little League, which we used to call Guinea Town.
Oh, Guinea Town.
Guinea Town.
You're obviously racially and ethnically sensitive.
Totally sensitive we were. Any chance we got our hands on an Italian kid from there, we beat the shit out of him. Anytime they got one of our guys, they beat the shit out of him. So, I mean, what? Just to go from nothing to nothing. One of our guys his father owned a paint store. And in the basement of the paint store, there was all kinds of rotting cans of paint. And so one of us, not me, but some evil fuck among us, decided to go into Guinea Town, beat the shit out of somebody, and stay long enough for a crowd to gather to run after us, which they did. And we took them. The route was between two buildings. On the top of one, which there was our special operations group with this fucking smelly bottle to get all paint.
Oh.
And sure enough, the Italian guys came running through that alley, and boy, the guys dumped this fucking shit on them. That was our idea of fun. Well, it was a rough neighborhood, you know. It wasn't actually all that bad. It was Italians and Jews, and I guess a little bit towards Southern Boulevard. Maybe there was some Irish. But the Italians were, let's see, I'm trying to think of east, west, north, and south. The Italians were north of us, you know, in Arthur Avenue and 188th Street and places like that. Mm-hmm. Tammy Moriello, the boxer, had a bar on Southern Boulevard and 188th Street. Anyway, I grew up in this family. My father had 5 kids when he married my mother. And my mother had 3 boys. And her husband died in the flu epidemic of 1917, 1918, which was devastating. They lived on Rivington Street or Pitt Street, somewhere on the Lower East Side, you know, where the Jews gathered in that period. And the flu hit both of them, both my mother and her first husband. And so they were both sick as a dog, but the husband died. And they took him out the back way so that it was a railroad flat, so they wouldn't have to come past my mother's room and she wouldn't have to see that they were taking a corpse out of there. Anyway, his name was Samuel Borak, B-O-R-A-K. And so she had 3 kids. She was left with 3 kids. And according to my calculation about how old she was and all that, she must have been, well, my oldest brother, her oldest son, and my oldest brother before the marriage was Uncle High, and Uncle High was born in 1911. She must have been in her teens, I think. And I even think she was married off by some broker or something, some marriage broker. I mean, she was sick. She couldn't read or write. She was not educated at all. I mean, they schlepped her over to America, I think, because they didn't know what else to do. She was a member of the family. She was a child, and she had another sibling, another younger sibling, a girl, Aunt Rose, with whom she hung around all the time. So when in 1918, she must have been what? I don't know, maybe 25, something like that.
What was her name?
Her name was Yetta. Yetta, the Jews would call her Itka.
Ditka.
Itka, yeah, I-T-K-A.
Huh.
But her name was Yetta. The family name, well, her maiden name was listed as Jackson. But of course, there's no, you know,
Jackson.
wasn't it? There was no Jackson. About 15 years ago, one of my surviving cousins, Irving Jackson, told me how that came about, which was the oldest Jackson sibling, Uncle Harry, was coming to America and was going to land in Canada, and struck up with a friendship with somebody who spoke Yiddish, I guess, an American. And the American said, "What's your name?" And he says, "Shecht." He says, "You can't go to America that way. You gotta have a real American name." I suggest Jackson. That's a real American. Why not?
Why not?
So the whole fucking Jackson tribe, and of the Jacksons, there was Jake, Max, and Harry were the men. And there were 4 sisters. My mother and Rose, and Tantas Lata, and Aunt Ruby. And fortuitously enough, Aunt Ruby was married to a guy named Velvel. And he conveniently died about a week before I was born. So they gave me his name in English translation, which is William.
Oh.
At any rate, there were a bunch of Jacksons, as you can see, 7 actually. 7. And they all had children, you know, a million relatives. Besides which, my grandfather Jackson was a sexy guy, sex maniac. So when his wife died in childbirth, his wife's name was Ida. No, she wasn't. It wasn't Ida. It was Chaya. That was her Jewish name. Chaya, and that's the name she was known by. And so there developed out of her death a dozen children with names like Ida, Hyman, all named after her. So anyway, there's my mother with 3 kids. The youngest of whom must be 2.
How many were living in your apartment when you were growing up?
When we got married, this is pre-marriage now. When they got married, there was 5 and 3 is 8, 10 people in the fucking apartment and 1 bathroom.
Wow.
So, like, my father had 3 girls and 2 boys.
Mm.
So the 3 girls occupied 1 fucking bedroom. How they managed it, I don't know, but they did. And the 2 boys, I guess they took another bedroom. And I don't know where the hell anybody else slept, to tell you the truth. There was a bedroom out in the hall. You went up the stairs and kept going, and you were in the apartment, there was a door there. And there was a passageway that opened another door, which was effectively out of the apartment.
Hmm.
So there was 4 bedrooms for 10 people, and a living room. So maybe somebody slept in the living room. Anyway, this was the situation. 5 kids. My father's first wife died in childbirth. there was a rumor going on around that he had a friend who was a doctor, and the doctor, how that could happen, I have no idea. The cultural differences were enormous. My father had been, I don't know, high school, something like that. He had been to school, and he could read, write, all that stuff. That there was a doctor who advised him, don't have any more children. And he ignored the doctor, and his wife died bearing the sixth child who was dead too. Died in that catastrophe. So he meets my mother, and they got married in, I guess, in 1922. At which point my brother George, who was the youngest of my mother's three, he was not yet my brother because I wasn't born.
No.
But he developed rheumatic heart fever, and my father was heartbroken because he loved this little kid very much, and he was a favorite. The kid was a favorite, and he spent all kinds of money. He had some money in those days. He started a contracting business. Plus, he also was a cabinet maker. He could make fine furniture. So, and he had a lot of commissions to do stuff. So he spent a lot of money on little George, and it was no use, and little George died. Some years ago, Joanna and I went to the cemetery and found George's grave. We straightened out the little gravestone that had tumbled. And what was really touching was we went to the office, and they showed us a record of when George arrived at the hospital and from where. From 717 East 181st Street. He died at home. And from there, they buried him.
Okay, let's stop for a second. I want to
Yeah. So